The sharp crack of a gavel echoed through the dusty courtroom of Silver Creek, Colorado, in 1876, as Judge Holloway condemned Quentin Young to a fate worse than death. Quentin stood tall, his weathered face betraying no emotion as the judge's words stripped him of everything he'd spent his life building. Quentin Young, for the crimes of which you have been accused, this court finds you guilty. Your name will be struck from all town records, your ranch forfeited to the territory, and you are hereby banished from Silver Creek. Should you return, you will be shot on sight. The murmurs that rippled through the courtroom meant nothing to Quentin. His eyes were fixed on only one face in the crowd: Viola Prescott, the town's schoolteacher, whose emerald eyes were now flooding with tears. Her slender fingers pressed against her lips to stifle a sob as the man she secretly loved was condemned for a crime he didn't commit. Quentin's hands were bound behind his back as the sheriff led him from the courthouse. The spring sun beat down mercilessly on his broad shoulders as he was marched past the businesses and homes he'd once been welcome in. Faces that had smiled at him just days ago now turned away in disgust or stared with cold judgment. "You have until sundown to gather what you can carry and ride out," Sheriff Dawson growled, cutting Quentin's bonds once they reached the jail. "And I wouldn't dawdle if I were you." Hamilton's boys seemed mighty eager to enforce the judge's ruling. Quentin rubbed his wrists, his blue eyes hard as flint. "You know I didn't steal that gold shipment, Dawson." The sheriff's gaze flickered away. "What I know doesn't matter. The evidence says you did, and that's good enough for the court." He handed Quentin his gun belt. "For what it's worth, I'm giving you your piece back. You'll need it where you're going." As Quentin buckled on his Colt, he thought of the railroad money that had disappeared 3 weeks ago, money he'd been transporting as a favor to the bank manager, Walter Hamilton. The same Walter Hamilton whose testimony had just condemned him. "This isn't over," Quentin said quietly. Sheriff Dawson's weathered face showed a flicker of something regret, perhaps. "For your sake, Young, I hope you're wrong, because if you come back here trying to clear your name, you won't live long enough to do it." Quentin's ranch was a modest spread 3 miles outside town. As he rode his bay stallion down the familiar trail one last time, his thoughts were a storm of anger and loss. 6 years he'd spent building this place after the war, turning a wild patch of Colorado territory into something that was his. Now it would all go to the highest bidder at auction, likely Hamilton or one of his cronies. He was shoving the last of his belongings into his saddlebags when he heard hoofbeats approaching. His hand moved instinctively to his gun, but he relaxed when he saw the rider was Viola Prescott. She dismounted in a flurry of dark green skirts, her chestnut hair coming loose from its pins as she rushed toward him. Viola had come to Silver Creek 2 years ago to teach at the newly established school, and from the moment Quentin had seen her stepping off the stagecoach with her books and determination, something in his heart had shifted. "You can't just leave," she said breathlessly, her voice breaking. "This is madness, Quentin. Everyone knows you wouldn't steal." He continued packing, not trusting himself to look at her directly. "Apparently not everyone, Miss Prescott. Viola," she corrected him softly. "After all this time, please call me Viola." He paused, finally meeting her gaze. "Viola then, but it doesn't change anything. The court has ruled." She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "I know you're innocent. I'll find a way to prove it. Hamilton is hiding something, I'm sure of it." Quentin gently removed her hand, though the touch sent warmth through him even in this darkest of moments. "Don't. Hamilton has the town in his pocket. If you start asking questions, you'll lose your position at the school or worse." "I don't care about my position," she said fiercely. "I care about justice. I care about—" She stopped, color rising to her cheeks. "About what?" he asked, his voice softer. "About you," she whispered. "I always have." For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. In another life, in different circumstances, those words would have been everything he'd wanted to hear. He'd admired Viola from afar, convinced that a refined, educated woman like her would never look twice at her rough cowboy with calloused hands and a war-torn past. Viola. He began, then stopped as the sound of approaching riders reached them. "That'll be Hamilton's men," he said grimly. "You need to go now." Panic flashed in her eyes. Come with me, we can go to Denver, find a lawyer, and you'd throw away everything you've worked for. He shook his head. I won't let you do that. He mounted his horse quickly. Go back to town, forget about me. I will clear your name, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I swear it, Quentin. He tipped his hat to her one last time. Goodbye, Miss Prescott. As he rode away toward the mountains, he didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Because if he did, seeing Viola standing there might break what little resolve he had left. The first weeks of exile were the hardest. Quentin moved constantly, taking odd jobs at ranches where no one knew his name or the judgment that had been passed upon him. He drifted through small settlements in the Colorado Territory, working just long enough to resupply before moving on. At night, beside lonely campfires, he would take out the single photograph he carried, a tintype of Silver Creek schoolhouse dedication, where Viola stood among the town dignitaries. Her face was small in the image, but he knew every line of it by heart. 3 months after his banishment, in a saloon in a mining town called Blackstone, Quentin overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Heard about that schoolteacher over in Silver Creek, one miner said to another. Stirring up all kinds of trouble, asking questions about that bank robbery back in spring. Hamilton's not happy about it, his companion replied. Word is he's looking to run her out of town. Shame, too, heard she's quite the beauty. Quentin's knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. Viola hadn't heeded his warning. She was putting herself in danger, and for what? A man who'd been legally erased from existence. He paid for his drink and left, his mind racing. Going back to Silver Creek meant risking his life, but staying away meant Viola might face Hamilton's wrath alone. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. Viola Prescott stared at the notice of termination on her small desk in the schoolhouse. She'd been expecting it for weeks, ever since she'd begun openly questioning Walter Hamilton's account of the gold theft. The town council had voted unanimously her services would no longer be required at the end of the month. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her desk drawer. Outside, her students were enjoying their lunch break, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in her heart. In the 4 months since Quentin's banishment, she discovered disturbing inconsistencies in Hamilton's testimony, but no one in town would listen. The bank manager's power had only grown since the robbery. He'd purchased 3 businesses on the main street and was now courting investors for a new mining venture. The stolen gold, nearly $20,000 worth, had provided him with the capital he needed to expand his empire. After dismissing her students that afternoon, Viola walked slowly to the town's record office. It had become her daily ritual, spending hours poring over documents, looking for anything that might help clear Quentin's name. The clerk, Mr. Peters, greeted her with his usual mixture of sympathy and resignation. Miss Prescott, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news, he said, adjusting his spectacles nervously. Mr. Hamilton has instructed me that you're no longer to be allowed access to the town records. Viola felt her heart sink. On what grounds, Mr. Peters? He didn't specify, madam, just said it was a matter of town security. The clerk looked genuinely apologetic. I'm sorry, she nodded stiffly. Thank you for telling me. As she turned to leave, Peters called after her in a lowered voice. Miss Prescott, if you're looking for information about certain matters, you might want to speak with Elijah Turner. Viola frowned. The blacksmith? Peters nodded slightly. He was on duty at the livery the night the gold shipment arrived, just before he took ill so suddenly. This was new information. Elijah Turner had been bedridden with a mysterious ailment for weeks following the robbery, and by the time he recovered, Quentin had already been tried and banished. Viola found the blacksmith at his forge, hammering a red-hot horseshoe. Despite the summer heat, his face seemed unnaturally pale. Mr. Turner, she called over the rhythmic clanging. Might I have a word? The big man looked up, his expression guarded when he recognized her. Miss Prescott. Heard they're letting you go from the school. News travels fast, she said with a tight smile. But that's not why I'm here. I need to ask you about the night the gold shipment arrived in Silver Creek. Turner's hammer paused mid-swing. He glanced around the smithy before setting his tools down. Not here, he said quietly. Meet me behind the church at sundown." Viola spent the intervening hours in a state of nervous anticipation. For months, every lead she'd pursued had evaporated, every potential witness suddenly developing amnesia about that night. Could Turner be the key to unraveling the truth? The church stood on the edge of town, its white steeple catching the last golden rays of sunlight as Viola approached. She found Turner waiting in the shadow of the building, smoking a pipe with trembling hands. "I ain't got long," he said without preamble. "What I'm about to tell you could get me killed." "I understand," Viola said softly, "and I'm grateful." Turner took a deep breath. "That night I was working late at the livery. Young came in with the strongbox, just like he was supposed to. Said he needed to keep it secure until morning when the bank opened. I helped him lock it in the storage room." "So the gold was still there when you last saw Quentin?" Viola asked eagerly. Turner nodded. "But that ain't all. About an hour after Young left, Hamilton showed up with his man Reeves. Said they needed to check on the shipment. I thought it was odd, but Hamilton's on the bank board, so I let them in. And then what happened? They offered me a drink, said it was cold out, that a nip of whiskey would do me good." Turner's eyes grew distant. "Next thing I knew, I was sicker than I'd ever been in my life. Couldn't keep nothing down for weeks. By the time I recovered, Young had been run out of town and everyone was saying he'd stolen the gold." "It was poison," Viola whispered. "They poisoned you so you couldn't testify." "That's my reckoning," Turner agreed grimly. "But it's my word against Hamilton's, and in this town that ain't worth much." "Did you see them take the gold?" Turner shook his head. "No, but I know Young didn't take it. He's a good man." Viola felt tears prick at her eyes. Finally, someone else was willing to acknowledge Quentin's innocence. "Mr. Turner, would you be willing to make a statement? If we could get the territorial marshal involved." "Marshals in Hamilton's pocket too," Turner cut her off. "Look, Miss Prescott, I've told you what I know because it ain't right what they did to Young, but I got a family to think about." As if to emphasize his point, a man on horseback rode slowly past the church, his gaze lingering on them. Viola recognized him as one of Hamilton's hired guns. "They're watching you," Turner said quietly. "And now they'll be watching me too. Be careful, Miss Prescott." That night, Viola couldn't sleep. Turner's story had confirmed her suspicions about Hamilton, but without hard evidence, it was still just hearsay. She needed proof, something concrete that would force the authorities to re-examine Quentin's case. A soft tapping at her window startled her from her thoughts. She approached cautiously, lamp in hand, and nearly dropped it when she saw who was outside. "Quentin," she gasped, quickly unlatching the window. "What are you doing here? If anyone sees you, I know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But I had to come back. I heard you've been asking questions, putting yourself at risk." In the lamplight, she could see how the months had changed him. His face was leaner, his eyes harder, yet the sight of him made her heart race as it always had. "Come inside," she whispered, stepping back from the window. He climbed through with the easy grace she remembered, then stood awkwardly in her small bedroom, hat in hand. Despite the danger, despite everything, Viola couldn't help but feel a surge of joy at seeing him again. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, even as she reached out to touch his arm, reassuring herself that he was real. "Hamilton has men watching me. I know, I've been watching them watch you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You're stirring up quite the hornet's nest, Miss Prescott." "Viola," she reminded him, "and yes, I am, because you're innocent and I can prove it." She quickly told him about her conversation with Turner, watching hope and anger war on his face. "I knew Hamilton was behind it," Quentin said when she finished, "but proving it is another matter." "Turner won't testify publicly, will he?" Viola shook her head. "He's afraid for his family, and he's right to be. Hamilton is even more powerful now than when you left." Quentin paced the small room. "There must be something concrete, some evidence they left behind." He stopped suddenly. "The gold itself. If Hamilton stole it, he must have hidden it somewhere before he could start spending it. He's been investing heavily these past few months," Viola said thoughtfully, "but not enough to account for $20,000 in gold. You're right, he must have hidden most of it." "His ranch would be the most likely place," Quentin mused. "But getting in there won't be easy. The place is like a fortress now." Viola's expression grew determined. "There might be another way. Hamilton has been courting me since you left." Quentin's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. What? Not successfully, she added quickly, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. But he's invited me to a dinner party at his ranch tomorrow night, a farewell gesture before I leave my teaching position. It's too dangerous, Quentin said immediately. If he suspects you're looking for evidence, he won't, Viola insisted. He thinks I'm just a foolish woman who needs to be taught a lesson. His arrogance is our advantage, Quentin. He stepped closer, his expression grave. Viola, I can't let you risk your life for me. It's not just for you, she said softly. It's for justice, it's for this town, and yes, it's for us. Her hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his calloused ones. Because there is in us, Quentin Young, whether you want to admit it or not. The touch of her hand, the earnestness in her eyes, it undid him. Before he could think better of it, Quentin pulled her to him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of months of longing and unspoken feelings. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Viola smiled up at him. So, are we in agreement? I'll attend Hamilton's dinner and look for evidence while you keep watch from outside, Quentin sighed, knowing he'd lost the argument the moment their lips had met. If anything seems wrong, anything at all, you find an excuse to leave immediately. Promise me. I promise, she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of determination and something deeper, something that made his heart stumble in his chest. As dawn approached, Quentin reluctantly prepared to leave. I'll be watching the ranch. If you find something, or if you're in danger, find a way to signal from the east-facing window. That's where I'll be positioned. Viola nodded. Be careful, Quentin. Half the men in town would shoot you on sight. I didn't survive Shiloh and the wilderness these past months just to get shot now, he said with a wry smile. He kissed her once more, gently. Tomorrow night, then. As he slipped out the window and into the pre-dawn shadows, Viola pressed her fingers to her lips, still warm from his kiss. For the first time in months, she felt true hope blossoming in her heart. Walter Hamilton's ranch house was the grandest in the territory, a two-story structure of stone and timber that spoke of old money and new ambitions. As Viola arrived in a borrowed buggy, she took a deep breath to steady her nerves. Her dark green dress, her finest, suddenly felt inadequate among the elaborate gowns of the other female guests. Hamilton himself met her at the door, his smile as practiced as his manners. At 45, he was still handsome in a severe way, with silver threading through his dark hair and cold calculation behind his charming facade. Miss Prescott, you look ravishing, he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. I'm delighted you accepted my invitation. It was most kind of you, Mr. Hamilton, she replied, forcing warmth into her voice. Especially considering our differences of opinion. He chuckled, as if her opinions about Quentin's innocence were merely charming eccentricities. My dear, I admire your loyalty, misplaced though it may be. Come, let me introduce you to my other guests. The evening progressed with excruciating slowness. Viola smiled and conversed with the town's elite, all the while watching for an opportunity to slip away. It came after dinner, when Hamilton announced he would give the gentlemen a tour of his new stable. Ladies, perhaps you would like to refresh yourselves upstairs, he suggested. Mrs. Tanner will show you the way. As the other women followed the housekeeper upstairs, Viola deliberately lagged behind. When they disappeared around a corner, she quickly slipped down a side hallway she'd noted earlier. It led to what appeared to be Hamilton's private study. The door was locked, but Viola came prepared. She removed a hairpin and, using a trick her brother had taught her years ago, manipulated the simple lock until it clicked open. Inside, the study was opulent leather-bound books, a massive oak desk, and a painting of Hamilton himself hanging prominently on the wall. Viola moved quickly, searching the desk drawers first. She found correspondence, ledgers, but nothing incriminating. A clock somewhere in the house chimed 9. She had perhaps 10 minutes before her absence would be noticed. Desperately, Viola scanned the room for anywhere else Hamilton might hide documents. Her eyes fell on the painting. Something about it seemed odd. It hung slightly away from the wall on one side. Heart pounding, Viola carefully lifted the frame, revealing a small wall safe behind it. This was beyond her lock-picking skills, but as she examined it, she noticed something scratched faintly near the dial numbers. Had Hamilton been careless enough to write down his own safe combination with trembling fingers, she turned the dial, right to 18, left to 42, right to 7. The safe clicked open. Inside was a leather ledger different from the ones in the desk. Viola opened it and had to stifle a gasp. There, in Hamilton's precise handwriting, was a detailed account of the gold $20,000 divided into smaller amounts, with dates and cryptic notations for each withdrawal. And there, on the first page, was the damning entry: QY elimination successful. Gold secured in mine shaft until suspicion passes. Viola quickly tore out the page and tucked it into her bodice. She was about to close the safe when she noticed another document, a deed to an abandoned silver mine outside town, purchased by Hamilton 3 days after the robbery. This had to be where he'd hidden the gold. She took this paper too, then carefully closed the safe and rehung the painting. She had just slipped out of the study when she heard footsteps approaching. Smoothing her skirts, she pretended to be examining a landscape painting in the hallway. "Miss Prescott," Hamilton's voice made her jump slightly. "I missed you among the other ladies. Are you lost?" "Just admiring your art collection," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "This landscape is quite beautiful. Is it local?" Hamilton studied her face carefully. "Yes, the mountains north of here. You have a good eye." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But the best views are from upstairs. Allow me to escort you." His hand on her elbow felt like a vise. As they climbed the stairs, Viola's mind raced. Had he noticed the missing papers yet? Would he check before the evening was over? She needed to signal Quentin, but the east-facing windows were all on the ground floor. She would have to find a way downstairs again, and soon. The opportunity came during the musical portion of the evening, when one of the ladies was prevailed upon to play the piano. In the commotion of rearranging chairs, Viola slipped away, claiming she needed fresh air. She made her way to what she hoped was the east side of the house, and found a small sitting room with large windows. Moving to one of them, she opened it slightly and waved her handkerchief 3 times the signal she and Quentin had agreed upon. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, barely visible in the darkness, she saw the flash of a mirror reflecting moonlight. Quentin had seen her signal. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. "A lovely night, isn't it?" Hamilton's voice came from the doorway. Viola whirled around, her heart hammering. "Mr. Hamilton." "Yes, I just needed some air." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "And yet, you seem to be signaling to someone outside. I wonder who that could be." Fear shot through her. "I don't know what you mean. I was just..." "Please, Miss Prescott. Let's not insult each other's intelligence." His affable mask had dropped completely now. "You've been in my study." The safe was left slightly ajar. Viola backed up until she felt the window ledge behind her. "I think I should rejoin the other guests now." Hamilton moved faster than she expected, crossing the room and gripping her arm painfully. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what you took and who you're working with." His eyes narrowed. "Is Young back? Is that who you were signaling?" A commotion outside saved her from answering. Shouts and the sound of running feet drew Hamilton to the window. In the moonlight, a figure on horseback was racing away from the house, pursued by several of Hamilton's men. "So he is back," Hamilton said, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Good. This saves me the trouble of hunting him down." He turned back to Viola, his grip tightening. "Now, what did you take from my safe?" "Nothing," she lied, wincing at his grip. Hamilton's other hand moved to her throat, his fingers pressing against her windpipe. "I won't ask again." The door burst open and the housekeeper stood there, her eyes wide. "Mr. Hamilton, there's a fire in the stables." Hamilton hesitated, torn between his prisoner and his valuable horses. "Watch her," he ordered the housekeeper, shoving Viola into a chair. "Don't let her leave this room." As soon as he was gone, Viola stood up. The housekeeper blocked the door, her expression uncertain. "Please, Mrs. Tanner, you know what kind of man he is. Help me." The older woman's resolve wavered. "He'll know it was me." "Not if the house is in confusion, please." Viola reached out and clasped the woman's work-worn hand. "A man's life depends on it." After a long moment, Mrs. Tanner stepped aside. "The back stairs, through the kitchen, be quick." Viola didn't need to be told twice. She fled down the servants' stairs and through the kitchen, where the staff was too busy watching the stable fire to notice her. Outside, chaos reigned as men rushed with buckets of water toward the burning building. Using the confusion as cover, Viola made her way to the tree line where she and Quentin had arranged to meet if things went wrong. For several agonizing minutes, she waited in the darkness, jumping at every sound. Finally, a low whistle came from deeper in the trees. She followed it until she found Quentin with 2 horses, his face blackened with soot. "Did you start that fire?" she asked as he helped her mount. "Seemed like the quickest way to create a diversion," he replied with a grim smile. "Did you find anything?" As they rode hard away from Hamilton's ranch, Viola told him about the ledger page and the mine deed. "The gold is there, Quentin. All we need to do is find it, and we can prove Hamilton framed you." "Not we," Quentin said firmly. "I'm taking you to the stage station at Miller's Crossing. You'll be on the first coach to Denver in the morning." "I'm not leaving," she protested. "Viola, Hamilton knows you took those documents. He'll kill you if he finds you." Quentin's voice was rough with fear for her. "At least in Denver, you'll be safe while I check out this mine." "We're in this together," she insisted. "Besides, I know where the mine is. You don't." Their argument continued all the way to the abandoned cabin Quentin had been using as a hideout. It was a simple one-room structure that had once belonged to a trapper, hidden in a small valley 5 miles from town. As they unsaddled the horses, exhaustion finally caught up with Viola. She swayed on her feet and Quentin caught her elbow to steady her. "You need rest," he said gently. "We can decide what to do in the morning." Inside the cabin, a small fire in the stone hearth provided warmth against the cool night air. Quentin offered Viola the cabin's only bed, a rough wooden frame with a straw-filled mattress, while he prepared to sleep on the floor. "This is absurd," Viola said after watching him arrange his bedroll. "That floor is hard as rock and you're exhausted too." Quentin looked up, a question in his eyes. "The bed is big enough for both of us," she said, her cheeks coloring slightly. "And we're both adults." He hesitated, then nodded. "If you're sure." They lay side by side in the darkness, not touching, yet acutely aware of each other's presence. The events of the day, the danger they'd faced and escaped together, had created an intimacy between them that transcended physical closeness. "Quentin," Viola said softly into the darkness, "when this is over, when your name is cleared, what will you do?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. "I never let myself think that far ahead," he finally admitted. "Surviving was enough." She turned on her side to face him, though she could barely make out his profile in the dim light. "And now. His voice was low, thoughtful. "Now I'm thinking about rebuilding, starting over." "Where?" she asked, her heart in her throat. His hand found hers on the blanket between them. "Wherever you are," he said simply. The words hung in the air, a declaration and a question all at once. Viola's answer was to move closer, finding his lips with hers in the darkness. That night, in a forgotten cabin in the wilderness, they found solace in each other's arms, a moment of tenderness amid the storm that surrounded them. Dawn broke with the sound of horses approaching. Quentin was up instantly, gun in hand, moving to the window. "Hamilton's men," he said grimly. "At least 6 of them. They must have tracked us." Viola quickly dressed, her mind racing. "The mine. If we can get there before them, find the gold, it's our only chance," Quentin agreed. He handed her his spare revolver. "Take this. Do you know how to use it?" She nodded. Her father had taught her to shoot years ago, though she'd never fired a gun in anger. "The mine is in Bear Canyon, about 3 miles north of town." They slipped out the back of the cabin as Hamilton's men approached from the south. Using the dense forest as cover, they made their way to where they'd hidden the horses. "We'll have to split up," Quentin said as they mounted. "I'll lead them away, give you time to reach the mine." "No," Viola protested. "We stay together." "Viola." He reached across to take her hand. "Trust me." "I'll meet you there." He leaned over and kissed her quickly. "Be safe." Before she could argue further, he was gone, riding openly across a meadow where Hamilton's men would surely spot him. Within moments, shouts confirmed they'd taken the bait. Viola rode north, her heart in her throat, praying Quentin would lose his pursuers and rejoin her. The map in her mind led her through winding valleys until she reached Bear Canyon, a steep-walled gorge with a small stream running through its center. The abandoned mine entrance was partially collapsed, its timbers rotted and sagging. Tying her horse to a nearby tree, Viola approached cautiously. The deed had mentioned the north shaft as Hamilton's recent purchase. She circled the main entrance and found a smaller opening, its timber supports newer than the rest. This had to be it. Taking a deep breath, Viola lit the small lantern she'd brought from the cabin and ducked into the shaft. The air inside was stale but breathable. The tunnel ran straight for about 50 yards before opening into a small chamber where mining equipment lay abandoned. Viola raised her lantern, scanning the space for any sign of Hamilton's stolen gold. A glint of metal caught her eye, not gold, but the barrel of a gun, pointing directly at her. "I must say, Miss Prescott, you've proven far more resourceful than I gave you credit for," Walter Hamilton said, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. "Though I'm disappointed you came alone. I was hoping to deal with Young as well." Viola's blood ran cold. "How did you get here before me?" Hamilton smiled thinly. "I've known about Young's cabin for weeks. I was waiting for him to make a move." He gestured with his gun. "The documents you stole, if you please." Slowly, Viola reached into her pocket and withdrew the folded papers. "The gold is here, isn't it? Hidden in this mine." "Clever girl. Yes, it's here." Hamilton took the papers, glancing at them briefly. "Though these alone wouldn't have been enough to convict me, it would have been your word against mine, and in Silver Creek, my word still carries more weight." "Not for much longer," came Quentin's voice from the tunnel entrance. Hamilton whirled, but he was too slow. Quentin's gun was already leveled at him. "Drop it, Hamilton." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with surprising quickness, Hamilton grabbed Viola, pulling her against him as a shield, his gun pressed to her temple. "I don't think so, Young," he snarled. "Drop your weapon, or she dies right now." Quentin's face hardened, but he slowly lowered his gun. "Let her go, Hamilton. This is between you and me." On the contrary, Miss Prescott made it her business when she started prying into mine. Hamilton backed toward another tunnel, dragging Viola with him. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take Miss Prescott with me as insurance. You're going to stay right here until we're gone." "And then what?" Quentin asked, his voice dangerously calm. "You kill her too, like you tried to kill me." Hamilton's laugh was cold. "Eventually. But not before she signs a confession stating that the two of you conspired to steal the gold and frame me. A tragic love story that ends with both of you as outlaws." As they reached the mouth of the second tunnel, Viola felt something shift beneath their feet. The ground seemed to tremble slightly. "The supports," she gasped, understanding dawning. "This section isn't stable." Hamilton hesitated, glancing nervously at the timber beams above them. It was all the distraction Quentin needed. He lunged forward as Viola drove her elbow hard into Hamilton's ribs. The banker's gun discharged, the bullet ricocheting off the rock wall. Quentin tackled him, and both men went down fighting. Viola scrambled away as the tunnel groaned ominously around them. "Quentin, the ceiling." She cried as dust and small rocks began to rain down. Hamilton, seeing his chance, broke free of Quentin's grip and fled deeper into the unstable tunnel. Quentin started after him, but Viola caught his arm. "No, it's going to collapse." As if to confirm her words, a deafening crack split the air. The tunnel behind Hamilton gave way, rocks and timber crashing down in a choking cloud of dust. Quentin pulled Viola toward the entrance, shielding her with his body as the cave-in continued. They emerged into daylight just as the main chamber collapsed behind them, sealing the mine and Walter Hamilton inside. They stood in the canyon, coughing and covered in dust, but alive. In the distance, they heard the approach of horses, more of Hamilton's men. Viola asked, raising the gun Quentin had given her. But as the riders came into view, Quentin relaxed. "No, that's Sheriff Dawson, and is that Turner with him?" Indeed, the blacksmith rode alongside the sheriff and 3 other men. They reined in their horses when they saw Quentin and Viola emerging from the collapsed mine. "Young," Sheriff Dawson said, his expression a mixture of surprise and something like respect. "Turner here rode into my office this morning with quite a story. Said Hamilton framed you for that gold theft." Quentin nodded toward the mine entrance. The proof was in there, Hamilton's records and probably the gold itself, but it's all buried now. Along with Hamilton, Viola added quietly. He was inside when it collapsed. Sheriff Dawson removed his hat. That's so, well, that complicates matters. Not as much as you might think, said a new voice. A man in a dusty suit dismounted from one of the horses. Marshal James Wilson, Territorial Authority. I've been investigating Mr. Hamilton for some time on suspicion of embezzlement and fraud. Hope flared in Viola's heart. Then you'll reopen Quentin's case. Clear his name, the marshal nodded. Based on Mr. Turner's testimony and what we find here, I think that's a distinct possibility, madam. As the men began discussing how to safely excavate the mine entrance, Quentin pulled Viola aside. I can't believe it's almost over, he said, wonder in his voice. After all these months, Viola reached up to touch his face, brushing away a smudge of dust. I told you I would clear your name. You did more than that, he said softly. You believed in me when no one else would. You risked everything. Not everything, she corrected with a smile. I found everything. 3 weeks later, Quentin Young stood once again in the Silver Creek courthouse. This time, however, he stood not as a prisoner but as a free man, officially exonerated of all charges. The territorial marshal had supervised the excavation of the mine, recovering both Hamilton's body and, more importantly, the stolen gold still in the original strongbox with the bank's seal intact. Turner's testimony, combined with the evidence from the mine and Hamilton's own papers, had been enough to clear Quentin completely. The town council, embarrassed by their rush to judgment, had voted unanimously to restore his property and publicly apologize. As Judge Holloway signed the official documents restoring Quentin's name to the town records, Viola sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. These were not tears of sorrow, as they had been on that terrible day months ago, but tears of joy and vindication. It is the finding of this court, Judge Holloway announced, that Quentin Young was wrongfully accused and unjustly punished. His name is hereby restored to all town records and his property returned to him in full, with compensation for damages incurred. The judge looked directly at Quentin. On behalf of the court and the town of Silver Creek, I offer our sincere apologies, Mr. Young. Quentin nodded, his expression solemn. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, well-wishers surrounded them. Many were the same people who had turned their backs on Quentin months ago, now eager to make amends. Some, like Turner, offered genuine congratulations. Others simply wanted to be seen supporting the man who had been proven right. When they finally broke free of the crowd, Quentin led Viola to his waiting wagon. There's something I want to show you, he said, helping her up to the seat. They rode in comfortable silence out of town, following the familiar road to Quentin's ranch. As they crested the final hill, Viola gasped. The ranch house, which had fallen into disrepair during Quentin's absence, was now freshly painted. New fencing enclosed the corral and smoke rose invitingly from the chimney. How did you manage all this so quickly? She asked as they pulled up to the hitching post. Quentin smiled. I had help. Turner and some of the other men who believed in my innocence. They've been working here while the trial was going on. He helped her down from the wagon, but instead of leading her into the house, he took her hands in his. Viola Prescott, you wrote my name back into existence with your determination and your belief in me. You fought for me when everyone else had given up. I couldn't let them erase you, she said softly, not when you had become so important to me. Quentin reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring with a modest diamond. I'm not a wealthy man, even with the compensation from the court, but everything I have, everything I am, I want to share with you, if you'll have me. Tears filled Viola's eyes once more as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you, Quentin Young, for all our days. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle of pure joy as the setting sun bathed them in golden light. A year later, the town of Silver Creek gathered for the wedding of Quentin and Viola Young at the white church on the edge of town. The schoolhouse where Viola had once taught was now expanded, with her serving as headmistress. Quentin's ranch had prospered, and he had been elected to the town council, a position he used to ensure justice for all citizens, regardless of their standing. As they exchanged their vows, Quentin looked into the eyes of the woman who had saved not just his life, but his very identity. In her steadfast love, he had found not only redemption but a future brighter than any he could have imagined. And in the town records, in the ledger of marriages, their names were written side by side, no longer erasable, but permanently etched in the history of Silver Creek and in each other's hearts. When the spring came again to the Colorado territory, it brought new life to the young ranch. Viola planted a garden beside the house while Quentin worked with the new foals in the corral. Their days fell into a rhythm of shared work and quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. On a warm evening in May, as they sat together on the porch swing, Viola took Quentin's hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. "We're going to need a bigger house," she said with a smile. "By winter, there will be 3 of us." The joy that spread across Quentin's face was brighter than the stars just beginning to appear in the twilight sky. He gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in all the world, which, to him, she was. "I love you, Viola Young," he whispered against her hair. "More than I have words to say." She nestled closer, secure in the knowledge that their names and now their child's would be written together in the story of their lives, a story that neither man nor misfortune could ever erase.